Good morning, everybody. In the years before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, many things happened which upped the pressure on the Americans to eventually go to war. And on September 4 in 1941, this date, one of our destroyers was attacked by a German U-boat. So just a few months before Pearl Harbor. Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, and World War II began in Europe. So Americans wondered what that meant for us. A few days later, the Germans sunk a British ship that had Americans on it, and Americans died. So that was a sobering event for our people to ponder. So Congress wanted to help our allies, but also wanted to stay neutral. So there were all kinds of acts of Congress passed which collectively are known as neutrality acts. Remember, a lot of Americans had a bad feeling about World War I and didn't want to get involved in another European war. The Battle of the Atlantic refers to the early years of World War II when German U-boats were sinking shipping from our country to Britain almost at will. And this is before we were officially in the war, so this was another sobering thing. And then when Germany and Italy became allies, here you see Hitler and Mussolini on the left at the Brenner Pass on the border of Italy and Austria. That was a big deal. So May of 1940, Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of England. Neville Chamberlain, who had signed the Munich Pact with Hitler, was out. Churchill was in. And soon after he became Prime Minister, the big evacuation at Dunkirk happened, where the Brits and the French and others were rescued by ships and ferried back to England to fight another day. But Germany sure looked unstoppable. In June, the German army marched into Paris. Here's Hitler by the Eiffel Tower. He also visited Napoleon's tomb. And who's going to stop Germany? In July, the Germans attacked England by air. This is known as the Battle of Britain. Here we see RAF pilots scrambling for their Spitfires, and the Brits held off the Germans, so that was a big deal. But Congress is still wrestling with how we could help our allies, so Lend-Lease is the name of that program. We were going to lend, air quotes, equipment to our allies, and much of it initially went to Europe. And when we started the draft in September 1940, when Congress passed the Selective Service Act, this was a real change. First of all, we weren't at war, and secondly, we had a historical dislike of big standing armies. But things are changing. A big change came, of course, in 1940 when Franklin Roosevelt was elected for a third term, our only third-term president, and he will be the World War II president. The USO was started in February of 1941. We associate the USO with entertainment of the troops in faraway overseas places, but it was started before we went to war. In August of 1941, Roosevelt and Churchill met in secret on warships off the coast of Newfoundland. Roosevelt and Churchill will have a pretty good relationship during the war, and out of this meeting came the Atlantic Charter, which reminded people of many of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points after World War I, but the Charter called for freedom of the seas and self-determination and lots of idealistic ideas, and it contributed to the UN Charter at the end of World War II. So here's our event. The USS Greer, a destroyer, built at the end of World War I, modernized, was doing a patrol in cooperation with the British, and a British plane had spotted a U-boat, and the Greer went after it, and then the U-boat fired at the Greer. And when Franklin Roosevelt did a fireside chat soon after, he mentioned that incident as an example of how aggressive the Germans were. And I think we can all agree that FDR was trying to prepare the American people for World War II. But on December 7, 1941, Japan made that an easy decision for us, didn't it, when it attacked us at Pearl Harbor and we entered World War II.